Hello, I'm David Little.
And I'm Jill Gittins. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our episode 6, The Origin of the Homeopathic Materia Medica, Part 1. And in this, we're going to take a look at how Hahnemann founded the science of our homeopathic remedies in his great work, the Materia Medica Pura. No, we're going to place it in a historical context here. We go back to the year 1811. This is 1 year after the publication of the first organon. Hahnemann and his family had moved from Torgau to the more stimulating environment of Leipzig, which was a great university town. It was during this time that the founder published the first section of the Materia Medica Pura. Samuel proved medicines on himself and on healthy volunteers, as well as collecting information on observations of side effects and poisonings from the old school of medicine. With the aid of his enthusiastic students, Hahnemann formed the first Provers' Union. Now, I'd like to say something about the first Provers' Union and give a little more of a human picture of what was actually going on here.
What a fantastic scene. I would have loved to have been there.
I'd like to have been a fly on the wall there. So the situation was this. Hahnemann was in his late 50s. He was lecturing in medicine at the university. However, his controversial views on medicine and his criticism of the regular school of medicine caused a lot of hostility and controversy towards him. So sometimes his lectures were boycotted. The other doctors disliked his views and ignored him. And students who sympathized with his views and were interested were actually cut by other students and sometimes got into trouble with their teachers or were failed in their exams for following Hahnemann's ideas. However, in spite of all this hostility, he gathered around him a group of enthusiastic, young and intelligent students, and he taught them how to do provings. And like I said, that would have been a wonderful time to be there. And we're going to give some more details later in this talk as to how he organized these provings and what he expected from his students. It was pretty thorough. So with Hahnemann and these students, with their help, he published 5 subsequent volumes of the Materia Medica Pura between 1816 and 1821. There are 63 remedies in the first edition with a few variations on mercury, aurum, argentum and the magnets. Then the second edition, also published in 6 sections between 1823 and 1826. They contain 4 additional remedies. Then the third edition, which only had parts 1 and 2, were published in 1830 and 1833. The Materia Medica Pura translation we are using, this one, is the edition published by R.E. Dudgeon in 1880. It contains 67 medicines, which is counting the magnets as 3 entries. Now, David is going to explain about Hahnemann's Preface, which contains so many wonderful hints as to the practice of homeopathy and these medicines.
In the Materia Medica, Hahnemann wrote an extensive preface, which really contains a surprising amount of information, some of which is very rarely looked at today. And he started out his preface by saying, "I'm not going to write a criticism of the ordinary Materia Medica, else I would lay before the reader a detailed account of the futile endeavors hitherto made to determine the powers of medicine from their color, taste, and smell." So there you can see color, taste, and smell. He's referring back to his commentary in Cullen's Materia Medica, where he did the first proving of China. And he had done enough criticisms of what he called the old school, so he didn't feel it was necessary to go through all of it again, although he couldn't totally resist from saying a few things in the preface that might be taken as being a bit critical at times. So, Hahnemann was really a well-known chemist of his times. And he went on to discuss the chemistry of his day in great detail. He reviews how extracts were being made from a number of chemical substances in a great variety of ways. And actually, he was quite a well-known chemist at his time. And I'm going to click up something here from Wikipedia on Berzelius, who was one of the foremost famous, chemists of his day.
Yes, this was actually a very exciting time in chemistry during Hahnemann's lifetime. And there were many brilliant chemists who were around at the time. Four of the major ones, the French chemist Lavoisier, who Hahnemann corresponded with, Robert Boyle, John Dalton, and the Swedish chemist Berzelius. And they all did a tremendous amount of work that forms the basis of our modern chemistry,
The
such
periodic
as
table.
the periodic table, atomic weights and measures, the Latin names by which we call the elements these days. Some of that work was due to the great Berzelius. Now, Berzelius knew of Hahnemann's work. He appreciated it. He thought it was wonderful. However, he couldn't understand the founder's movement into the infinitesimal realm of energy medicine. And in fact, he once remarked about Hahnemann, that man would have made a great chemist had he not turned out a great quack. So he thought Hahnemann was a great chemist, but he couldn't understand the homeopathic paradigm as a chemist.
Okay. A great chemist. Hahnemann was a great chemist. And the problem today is the same problem Hahnemann had in his time. It's the size of the dose is so small and potency factors are so high. Can you imagine? Hahnemann in his time is speaking of millions, billions, trillions, and quadrillions of fractions. And that was beyond the comprehension at his time. And when you think about it, really, Einstein's idea in astrophysics was that the observable universe was a million times million, one was 1 million, millionth, which is a quadrillionth. So Hahnemann was talking about in potencies the same kinds of numbers, not identical, the same kinds of numbers that Einstein was relating to the size of the observable universe. So of course the chemists of his day and the chemists of today don't understand homeopathy, and the reason they say we're quacks is because of potency. It's the infinitesimal. Hasn't dawned in their minds that it's possible, because homeopathy is really the medicine of the future, more than the medicine of the past. So I just wanted to share some of those numbers with you. So where are we, Jill?
Okay. Hahnemann points out that the latest chemical sciences cannot extract the inner vason, the true essential nature of remedial substances. Hahnemann wrote this in his preface: certainly the material substances extracted from them were not the spirit animating every single substance which enables it to cure certain morbid stages. This spirit cannot be laid hold of by the hands. It can only be recognized by its effects on the living body.
You know, in the first podcast, I talked about how you can't lay your hands on the vital force. You can't see the waste in the test tube. And in this old Materia Medica Pura here, this is my old copy. It's 30 to 40 years old. And in there, it has my margin notes that I wrote all those years ago. And one of them that I underlined was this quote. And I didn't see this when I made the first podcast, but I spontaneously, subliminally came out with the almost exact same words as this quote. And I went and I looked in my old Materia Medica Pura, and lo and behold, I had underlined that quote, put an X on it. And that X on that quote stuck in my mind for 35 years, and spontaneous came out when I thought of the Wason. So, that's really quite amazing, actually, that my memory would remember that without me consciously remembering any of it.
All right, so Hahnemann used his chemical knowledge to prepare mineral remedies. He had to take the crude materials and purify them and prepare them so they could be potentized and safely used as remedies. Now we have an example here, which is in the Materia Medica Pura. It's the remedy bismuth, and I believe that David has a picture of this.
There we go. All right.
This is bismuth.
Can you read that, Jill? Just what it says.
Yes, bismuth, Bi, the most metallic and the least abundant of the elements in the nitrogen group, group 15 of the periodic table. Bismuth is hard, brittle, lustrous, and coarsely crystalline. It can be distinguished from all other metals by its colour, grey-white with a reddish tinge. Its atomic number is 83.
Well, let's see. We've got a periodic table up now. And here we go. Period 15, the nitrogens. Nitrogen, phosphorus, arsenic, antimony, then bismuth in the 6th period here. So you can see it's down with the heavy metals. Like these are all proven remedies through here. These ones are more experimental. What do we got to start out with? Can you read that, Jill?
Caesium, barium.
And then off to these lesser known elements. Where the homeopathic provings pick up is by iridium,
Iridium,
platina, aurum, mercury, titanium, more or less known, plumbum, and finally bismuth. So you can see bismuth as antimony above it, plumbum to one side. Below it, one of the newer elements.
There's something that is probably
Moscovium.
Yes.
I
think those are all radioactive.
Yeah. Bismuth is slightly radioactive itself. So we can see its place in the periodic table. And Hahnemann actually did a proving of that in the Materia Medica Pura.
In the Materia Medica Pura, he explains how he purified this, and I am going to read what he wrote there. If we can have that on screen. Okay, this is how he did it. Bismuth, or wismuth. This brittle, easily melted, reddish-white metal is dissolved in a sufficient quantity of nitric acid to saturation. The perfectly limpid solution is dropped into a considerable quantity of pure water, from 50 to 100 parts, and well stirred. The precipitated white sediment, oxide of bismuth, after standing a couple of hours, is freed from the superincumbent fluid by carefully decanting. Then, again, as much pure water mixed with a few drops of potash is poured on it and the sediment well stirred through it. The precipitate, after standing for some hours, is freed from the superincumbent water by decanting, and the sediment is completely dried on blotting paper on which other blotting paper is laid and weights laid on it until all moisture is removed. When perfectly dried, this is oxide of bismuth. Now, after this, Hahnemann gives instructions for triturating this product up to 2C, 1 to the 10,000th strength.
So you can see how chemically advanced Hahnemann was as a chemist and why the chemists of his day knew who he was. And if it wasn't for potency and the fact he had gone crazy as far as they were concerned, he would have been in the history of chemistry as one of the 5 major founders of modern chemistry. And Hahnemann went beyond modern chemistry into the chemistry of the future. Star Trek chemistry.
Beam me up. Okay, now that's how he approached the preparation of mineral remedies. Up to that point, the majority of his remedies, in fact, had been from the plant world. But he was also equally strict with how he prepared these. In fact, as I mentioned with the Provers' Union, it wasn't just like he was giving these young men little white pills out of a bottle. He wasn't doing that at all. In fact, what he did was send them out into the fields and the forests to collect suitable plants.
We just order them from the pharmacy.
Yes, just little white pills. But he sent them out into nature so they would understand what plants were available at what time of the year, how they should be picked, because he always said it was always best to use fresh plants when possible.
When he couldn't get the fresh plants, he would go to the apothecaries to get the plant remedies, but he was always suspicious of adulteration, them being old, dried out, losing their medicinal power, so he always tried to get the freshest and cleanest and most pure forms of the botanical remedies, as he did his own chemistry on the mineral remedies.
All right, now we're going to move on to the subject of how medicines are prepared today. Over long periods of time, the use of medicines has progressed from their raw substances to powders, teas, distillates, then into extracts, and finally synthesized drugs. Now I'm going to take a well-known example. The willow tree bark, genus Salix, is a plant that was used way back by Hippocrates and even in older times. The bark of this tree contains salicin. Now, the reductionist allopaths decided that it was this chemical was the active ingredient. In 1897, they developed a new synthetic chemical analogue called aspirin, which of course everybody's heard of, which is acetyl salicylic acid. It is used in modern times as an anti-inflammatory, antipyretic, analgesic, and a blood thinner. All right, now I'd like to read you the side effects of aspirin. These include confusion, hallucinations, seizures, tinnitus, rapid breathing, bleeding of the stomach, bloody stools, coughing blood, coffee ground vomit, fever, and swelling.
Well, right there you can see that simple over-the-counter medicine like aspirin, it doesn't do this to everyone, that's for sure. But there are people where these symptoms do appear, and that's why they're written on certain warnings written on the labels. So the ancients used mostly white willow, I believe.
Yes, it was mostly white willow, and it was the bark of the white willow.
Well, this is white willow, isn't it?
Yes, this is.
Okay.
Salix alba.
All right, then. I'm going to return to a subject that I'm sure many of you are probably sick of by now, and that's the action-reaction model. And why do I go over and over and over it? Is because it's so important. If you don't understand the action-reaction model, you don't understand how homeopathic remedies cure, or even how they work, and also the different kinds of remedy reactions they can produce. So, because I'm going to review those subjects in a little more detail, I wanted to talk about the action-reaction model one more time, but from a different level. I know I've said it many times, but I keep trying to introduce it on higher and higher levels, like a spiral working its way up. A cycle where, I come over the same material, but I do it on a different level. And here, I have a really important thing to read to you. I wrote a little article for this part. So I'm just going to take some time and read it. And if I need any help, I'll ask Jill to do the reading. So, I love the first organon. Yes, I'm still reading it. It's my favorite right now. And this was inspired by the first organon, and I think it's really special, and I'll try to see if I can make some sense out of it for me and for you also. Aphorism 6 of the first organon explains the action-reaction model for two complementary opposite powers, the physical and dynamic planes. Newtonian mechanics explains the mechanical world, and quantum mechanics explains the world of dynamics. Hahnemann wrote that, quote, physical things, unquote, are transformed through, quote, their exact opposites, in the way that acids are opposed by alkalis to produce neutral salts. And he also mentioned something very interesting because it relates to Newton's laws of motion. He said if you have a body moving at a certain speed in a certain direction, the only way to arrest that motion is to come to it from the opposite direction with the equal or stronger force to bring that moving body to rest. That's the action-reaction model on the mechanical plane. Then he wrote, the vital organism of animals, however, works by a different set of rules. Opposites rule inorganic mineral kingdom and the physical laws, but similars rule the inner biology of living beings. The functional polarity is yet resolved. This functional polarity is resolved in the vital principle of the unitary multiverse, the anima mundi. The anima mundi, quite a concept. Jill, what can you say about the anima mundi?
The anima mundi is like the world soul. It is like the essence of Gaia. It's in all of us, in everything.
The Wason.
Yes.
The Wason of the earth.
It is everything, and yet it cannot be seen. And yet it moves everything.
Okay. What then is the effect of using chemical medicines by contraries on the animal organism? So we've already defined physical things and dynamic things, or Hahnemann has defined it. So, where am I, Jill? What then is the effect of using chemical medicines by contraries on the animal organism? When there is an inflammatory condition, using an anti-inflammatory drug causes the organism to downregulate its own anti-inflammatory processes, allowing for more inflammation as the drug wears off. Do you follow that? Think about it, what he's saying in these wonderful aphorisms in the first organon. Toxicity and side effects are inherent to allopathic medicines. That's why every medicine comes with warnings on the label or in a little package inside, or you see them on TV, on the news advertising, which are like almost a majority of drug company advertisings. And you have all these people dancing around, smiling and singing and playing and looking young and happy while they're reading out these horrible side effects at the same time. It's rather bizarre in a lot of ways, because toxicity and side effects are inherent to allopathic medicines. Now, a good allopath who's got his Hippocratic hat on understands this and tries to be careful with his drugs. But the mechanist allopaths throw these drugs around as if it's no problem. You see people there on 5, 6, 7 prescription drugs. How do they know how all these things act together? They may know their individuals, ingredients and parts and chemicals, but do they know how they interact? Or are they looking at how they interact? Do they care about if they interact? Well, some do, and some don't. So, treating an anti-inflammatory disease with an anti-inflammatory, pro-inflammatory antagonistic, oh my God. Treating an inflammatory disease with an anti-inflammatory chemical provokes a pro-inflammatory antagonistic secondary action by the vital force. Get this one, Jill.
This makes it appear like the disease is actually getting worse and then calls for more medicine in larger doses.
Oh, that's an important point. So you see the antagonistic secondary action, the vital force is trying to throw it off. And they think, oh, it's getting worse. I must give more in a higher dose. They're not getting enough medicine. It's getting worse.
Give them more.
More is more.
Right. And
more
then
is best.
This leads, so then they take more medicine. This leads to increased side effects, drug tolerance, suppression, and the metastasis of the inflammation to deeper and more important regions.
Okay, I promise that's the last time I went over it. In fact, I confused myself. So I hope it came across in a way that's comprehensible to you, because it's really important to understand this action-reaction and the difference between physical and dynamic. For example, if somebody comes and they're extremely dehydrated, they haven't had enough water in a long time, you don't fast them on water or away from water. You give them water because it's a physical thing. And on the physical plane, opposites are beneficial. You hydrate them. They are dehydrated. You hydrate them. All right? That's a physical thing. If your arm doesn't work so well and it's weak, you contract the arm and you run the lever. That's on the physical planes. But if the arm is innervated by nervous energy, and that nervous energy is blocked, then you may need a dynamic remedy to clear the dynamic mistunement of the arm that's causing the muscle to be weak. But it still means that you need exercise as a complementary physiotherapy. So these things work together if you know how to use one and how to use the other. In fact, Hippocrates said actually one time that both similars and opposites cure, but you have to know when to use one over the other. Dynamic problems, which are the deeper problems, similars. Physical problems, opposites can be helpful. Somebody's cold, you give them a blanket. Somebody's starving, you give them food. But to deal with the malnutrition and the side effects and the damage of the organs caused by the disease causations, similars, cure. So I wanted to make this clear if possible. If it can be made clear, I'm trying to make it as clear as I can. So, Jill?
Yes. So now if we take our example that we're looking at Salix alba and aspirin. Now, if you take a homeopathic preparation of Salix alba, white willow, and you treat somebody by similar symptoms in a tiny dose of the potentized medicine, then you get the opposite effect from what he was talking about. The primary action of the homeopathic remedial disease replaces the sensation of the natural disease in the vital force. That stimulates a curative secondary reaction. It makes your own vital force react the right way. The homeopathic remedy is an energetic data package that gives the mistuned vital force the right information to retune itself to the harmonious play of life.
Who wrote that? Me? Oh, data package.
And,
a data package.
Yes, a data package, that's right.
Let's think about that for a second. The primary action of the homeopathic remedy, the artificial disease, what did Hahnemann say? It removes the sensation, it overtunes the sensation of mistunement in the vital force. Then the vital force reacts to the remedy information, the data given to it. It's confused. It doesn't know how to react. And since it doesn't know how to react, it has a tendency to complicate the situation, like in autoimmune diseases. The immune system doesn't know how to react, so it attacks its own tissue. So that confusion is there. And the homeopathic remedy gives the right information of the right level for the vital force, or be that the immune system, to react against what is necessary to be removed, not its own tissue. So the remedy disease replaces the natural disease and its sensation in the vital force that causes a curative secondary healing reaction. Therefore, we call it the action-reaction model. So I hope we didn't muddle that up too much.
Yes, I have another paragraph on this right here.
Oh, another paragraph.
Which explains it even more. All right, one more time through.
Just one more time, I promise.
When the living organism perceives the purely dynamic remedial inflammation, it causes a curative secondary action of the organism that upregulates its own anti-inflammatory processes and then calms down the inflammation naturally. The tendency of the living organism to upregulate and downregulate life processes is witnessed in a number of ways. In general, if one uses too many strong physical agents, the organism will tend to downregulate its own endogenous production of targeted agents, therefore worsening the condition.
No upregulating,
Upregulating, downregulating. Your own body, I should wear a t-shirt that says reaction, 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 because we are reactive bodies. We're not like car engines you can just pour things into and make them go.
That's the physical things.
Right. But our body is a reactive mechanism. It reacts to subtle energies. So if you want to make your own system work more effectively, you don't whomp it with physical agents
For example,
that therefore causes it to down-regulate itself and not work
for
properly.
example, take hormones. Obviously, if you don't really need them desperately, when you supply the body with artificial hormones, it will downtune itself. The organism will downtune its own production of this very same hormones. Now, obviously, if somebody has no hormones or a damaged organ, their pancreas or something, that you have to respond physically with replacement therapy, like put them on insulin. That's true with type 1 diabetes especially. Type 2 is amenable to homeopathic remedies, diet, and lifestyle. Many cases are corrected of type 2, but type 1, it's much more difficult. So there, because it's so physical, it's what Hahnemann called a physical thing. You have to use replacement therapies. They don't have insulin, give them some insulin. But if they're having trouble producing insulin, give them a remedy that stimulates the vital force to produce more insulin, to upregulate the insulin production. A bit theoretical, but I think it has some practical aspects to it. So, Jill, I'm going to have you read the next paragraph,
all
and
right.
I'll take over.
Now, one of the things we've been trying to say is this. Allopathic drugs are inherently have dangers and side effects. Inherently. That's why you get on every packet of allopathic medicine, you will get warnings. And if you look it up on the computer, it'll give lists of side effects. They are inherent in them. You may not suffer all of them if you took it, but they are inherent in them. However, homeopathic remedies, they are non-toxic. And they don't have any inherent side effects. However, if given wrongly or in too large of a dose, they can cause things like aggravations, accessory symptoms, and new symptoms. However, unlike allopathic side effects, homeopathic remedy reactions can be minimized by the careful employment of the checks and balances that Hahnemann integrated into his system. The study of remedy reactions is part of posology and case management. It is one of our most important and favorite subjects, is actually posology and dosage, because if you do it properly, homeopathic remedies are very safe to use. But you have to be a carefully observing physician, as Hahnemann would say, and use the minimum dose of the potentized remedy. And be very careful with your doses. If you do, it is really a very safe medicine.
Okay, we went back to one of my other favorite subjects, action-reaction model followed by remedy reactions. Basically, there are 5 types of remedy reactions. Adam, can you put that up? Here we go. Pure elimination with the restoration of vitality. Well, that's what we'd like to see all the time. And that mirrors what Hahnemann spoke about in aphorism 2 of the Organon of Medicine. It's when he spoke about a rapid, gentle, and permanent cure. So you give the remedy and it acts just beautifully. And the symptoms go down, the vitality goes up, the person becomes harmonious and happy in their life. But you have to be careful here, because it can be too much of a good thing for some people. If the dose is acting in a striking manner, leave it alone. I don't care if you're using C or 50 millesimolar potencies. Doesn't matter what you're using. Low potencies. If they're rapidly healing and it's pure amelioration, don't repeat the dose. Let it act until you see it come to standstill or start to relapse a bit. These are striking responses, even with the 30C or the 50 millesimolar 01s. A single dose can act for weeks, months. I've seen them actually go for a year or more occasionally. Sometimes completely cured, it goes forever, which is quite a wonderful thing. So if it's going really good, leave well enough alone. I've learned that over the years. I didn't always know it. The first 10 years, I didn't get it, actually, until I really read the Organon and really studied. And the 40 following years, I paid much more attention. That's for sure. Year by year, day by day. So, number one, pure amelioration. Wonderful. Does it happen all the time? No. What's one of the other things? Some often see more than others, depending on how they give the dose, is a similar aggravation. What's a similar aggravation? That's an increase in the presiding symptoms, or the appearance of old symptoms, which are often taken as a good sign. Of course, it is in some ways a good sign. But if the remedy is perfectly matched, you don't see the presiding symptoms increase, and you don't see old symptoms come back. You see pure amelioration with a restoration of vitality. So a similar aggravation. It really means the dose and potency were too strong. The overtuning of the disease in the vital force and the sensations too strong, and it causes the sensations to increase. It's not a healing crisis. It's not an elimination. If it's mild and quick, it's okay. If it's strong and remains and goes on for a long period of time, it's not okay. So you have to be aware of similar aggravations. Number 3, accessory symptoms. These are side actions caused by a partial simillimum. Hahnemann once said, it's very hard to find two triangles that fit exactly over each other. There's always a few edges sticking out. These edges are the potential for accessory symptoms. If the edges are really small, then the vital force, as it removes the natural disease, will remove the accessory symptoms because they're mild. But the more the corner sticks out, the stronger the accessory symptoms are, the more troublesome they can become, until accessory symptoms can become so strong that they basically turn into dissimilar aggravation, which means it's too far from the center. If it's close enough, it's close enough. It might lead to what the old-timers called a little zigzag prescribing. As you do one remedy and some accessory symptoms come up, the amelioration slows down. You have to retune them with another remedy. Zig to the right, zag to the left. But if it's all within reason, within close to the center of the disease state, then you progress towards cure. It's not as straight as pure amelioration, straightforward, direct line. It's going zig, zag. If your zigzags are just a little bit, it's like tacking up against the wind. It's okay. Sailing. You're sailing with it. You use the wind. If they become stronger and stronger and the healing effect gets less and less and the accessory symptoms get stronger, it can actually turn into or be the same as number 4, a dissimilar aggravation. What is a dissimilar aggravation? Those are new symptoms not appertaining to the disease under treatment. The remedy caused those symptoms. It's the wrong remedy. It's not a healing crisis. It's not an elimination. It's not a similar aggravation. It's not accessory symptoms. It is the wrong remedy. It's a dissimilar aggravation. It's not a healing crisis. Some homeopaths act like every reaction is a good reaction. It simply isn't that easy. I'm sorry. I wish it was. But it's not. You have to learn these remedy reactions. There's another one that can even be more troublesome, and that's number 5. Idiosyncratic reactions. These people are hypersensitives, and some of them can react to almost anything with an allergic type of reaction. They are the hardest cases to cure. In the hands of most homeopaths, it's almost impossible to cure. If you know Hahnemann's advanced methods that he developed for the fifth and sixth organon for the C and 50 millesimal potencies, then you rarely see similar aggravations. Sometimes it's hard to match it, one exactly on top of the other, but it's slight or sudden or not at all. Accessory symptoms. If they come, they're mild. The vital force throws them off. If they're big, they're troublesome. Dissimilar aggravation. New symptoms. But the idiosyncratic reaction is one that makes no sense. It can be paradoxical. Hard to understand. You try this dose, you try that dose. And every dose seems to aggravate, no matter what remedy, what potency, what dose you give. Now, over the years, I've had to regularize cases where the remedy reactions were prolonged. Some mildly irritating, some very strong, actually. And why is this? It's because you need to know the remedy reactions, and you have to learn the countermeasures that regularize the vital force. I can't go into this much deeper in these podcasts, but there are counteractions, countermeasures that regularize the vital force, and I've regularized quite a few cases in my years. I'm almost known for that a bit. And a lot of my students and patients are really homeopaths. And we've all seen these things, and we've all wondered on these things. And sometimes we're up in the night wondering about these things. Because of Hippocrates telling us what to do first is heal and to do no harm. And we have a medicine that's safe if you know the checks and balances. Similars would be dangerous without the small dose and potency factor. Why do we use single remedies? Because polypharmacy is hard to understand what is causing what. The minimal dose. This is a really big one, and it's not very well understood. I don't know if this is a time or place to go into it, but the idea that the size of the dose doesn't matter, which is actually a teaching of one of my favorite homeopaths, somebody I won't bash. I'm not a Kent basher. But when Kent said that and people took that up as being the way it works, that changed something very fundamental, because before Kent, the size of the dose mattered. After Kent, today it doesn't matter. I still see homeopaths just take a piece of paper, tap a bunch of pills out of the vial, throw it in the patient's mouth, and that's the dose. 1 pill, 2 pills, 5 pills, 10 pills. Well, if you believe Kent, 1,000,000 pills. Doesn't matter. Talk to Hahnemann about that, or Herring, or Jar, or Bowenhausen. See what they have to say. And now I'm getting carried away. So I better see where I'm at. Checks and balances, please. Checks and balances, so important. So I think that's enough for this podcast, really. And I'm running out of wind, which some people are probably happy about.
All right then. Thank you all for listening. I hope you're still with us. I invite you all to join us for our next podcast. And now this is such a big subject we've embarked on here. We were just looking at the preface to the Materia Medica Pura, but there is so much in it to unpack. So in our next podcast, we'll be continuing this subject. And I hope you will join us for that. And if you like our podcast, please support us. Please please click subscribe and also the notification icon, and you will receive our new podcasts and our updates. And we'd really love to hear from you. Please leave comments. We really appreciate them. And if you want to contact us, please send your emails to davidlittletalks@gmail.com if you have any questions, comments, if you're interested in our forthcoming classes, anything like that. Please write to us on that email. If you want information about David's textbook, the Homeopathic Compendium, check out our website at friendsofhealth.com. All these links and others are in the description below. Now, I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to say good night, stay happy, stay healthy. Join us for our next podcast.
As usual, my last words. Checks and balances, please. Let us learn our checks and balances. Let us learn our remedy reactions, what they mean, how to teach us how to follow a case, how to deal with Hahnemann's direction of cure, commonly called Herring's Law. These are really important subjects for a true classical homeopath. So the last thing I want to say is remember checks and balances. Other than that, I've already said too much, possibly. So I'll say too little. So good night from David Little and Jill Giddens.